on scaling in your innovation projects in partnership with WFP and other allies. What lessons can you share with startups, entrepreneurs in the audience, and that would help them shape their own growth and scale up experience strategy?
Absolutely. To me, the point is most useful for companies operating in the food security space, but I guess it can be applied to at least environmental sustainability, social innovation in general. And it is this. These problems are very technical. The problems surrounding, in this case, the value chain of food distribution is very complicated. Why some ingredients reach people at low prices, why some ingredients reach people at high prices, how the, I don't know, the war in Ukraine affected the price of bread. It's very complicated. So in our case, the research around nutrition and low-cost nutrition to offer low-income populations in Latin America is very technical. It depends on the grains that are available, on the staples, dairies, the industry standards, labor regulations. So I guess all of this means that it is very useful, first and foremost, in the ability to understand the problem at the depth level that's needed to come up with an innovative solution that is actually useful. So many times, entrepreneurs are good for their ability to have a vision, rally people around them, take risks, be fearless. But if on one hand you are building a company that addresses, I don't know, let's say in the fashion industry or something less technical and difficult than addressing food insecurity, then teaming up with experts is really helpful. See, in entrepreneurship, there is a concept that is a key concept in the early stages of a company called product market fit. And product market fit means that an organization is offering people, be it consumers, beneficiaries, something they want and something that is useful for them and they can pay for. All of the three together. Or in the case of NGOs, that it is useful for the developmental purpose or the social purpose that they pursue. But the key concept is whether you have something to offer that people want. And that is a highly technical thing to do. We've seen I want to be general so that everyone can understand why it's valuable to interact with people with deep technical expertise in something. But in the case of the World Food Program, this is an organization that won a Nobel Peace Prize. So it's very illuminating to tap into the studies, tap into the accumulated knowledge, and collaborate. That's why I say public-private collaboration is essential. I don't know about it in theory, but in our case, it's been immensely useful. We've worked in Mexico and in Argentina by ourselves, and then thanks to the partnership with the World Food Program, we've been able to scale to Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, Peru, like 5 countries in less time than it took us to build one by ourselves. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to team up with experts in a given field to advance the organization's product market fit.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you for that collaboration. And as you well said, collaboration between partners is key when scaling. You mentioned the WFP and partnering with Nilus. And in this journey, we have had other stakeholders. And a key ally is HIP Norway, as you mentioned. And with that, I wanted to ask Ragnhild that from HIP Norway's perspective, what you think could make an innovation across the UN scale ready? And from your perspective, what do you look before supporting or deciding to support a project?
Yes, so before deciding to support scaling projects, we don't have a very rigid sort of theoretical framework that we apply. We look at holistically the overall quality of a pilot or of a scaling project. But I could highlight some things that we see are quite necessary in order for a project to scale well. And I will build on what Adi was just saying about, and you were just saying as well, about partnership. And specifically, since we support partnerships between humanitarians and private sector actors, we see that a project is typically not ready to scale if they haven't found a partnership model where everyone is correctly incentivized to keep working on the project. So for example, a type of pilot that you may see in the humanitarian sector could be that there's only really a temporary agreement with a company where the only thing they are incentivized to do is to deliver a new solution in a limited scope, in a limited time frame, because it gives them some exposure to the context. And it gives the UN agency perhaps some in-kind free access to a service that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to pay for. But then there's no sustainability in that model. And what you've done is you've temporarily implemented a service that people might actually like and that might matter to them. And then you have to take it away because there was no partnership where all parties were able to really be incentivized to continue the project. And this goes to expertise as well. We believe that it's important for UN agencies to understand the limits of their own expertise and to understand what their ideal role is in an innovation partnership. And sometimes that is limited to, facilitating and building bridges to other actors, whether it be government or private sector partners that come in and have more expertise. Adi just highlighted how technical his service is. So realizing that you might have to take a step back certain times, where to let go and where to let your private partner have access to do what they do best is also critical to kind of get a pilot to a stage where it can grow. We see that the private sector is really strong when it comes to harnessing the feedback and observing the behavior of end users and then tweaking and changing their product in order to meet demand. And as Adi was mentioning, having the sort of product to market fit, that's their expertise. And projects that are ready for scale have been able to understand this and harness these strengths from their partners. And this stakeholder management, getting these partnership contracts to really work, that can be a big part of a pilot. Just setting yourself up for sustainability and setting yourself up for scale that requires a lot of attention and a lot of collaboration and a lot of trust building, even because you're merging different cultures. The cultures of startups and entrepreneurs is typically wildly different from big UN agencies. So the UN agencies are kind of the tankers, and the entrepreneurs and startups are the fast speedboats. And working together can be a challenge. So spending enough time on getting those structures right is important, and having a realistic sense of who is the scaling agent. Will this scale through market mechanisms, through typical just market demands, or will it require that multiple UN agencies adopt a solution in a strategic manner? And then the second thing that I think is successful often is the right type of attention and interaction with early adopters. Typically in our projects, the early adopters, the end users will be people affected by crisis. And we see that a weakness when people are trying to move from pilot to scale is that they haven't spent enough time working with the early adopters and setting aside enough time and resources to iterate enough times that they know what challenges will come up, what opportunities will come up. And I think in most projects, you will see that the way that the end user is using your solution is typically different than what you had intended or what you had imagined. And so you have to give yourself enough time to tweak and change your solution a few times before you think about scale. Otherwise, you don't have enough information.
Thank you, Raquel. I'm going to highlight two terms, two concepts from what I heard from you. One is human-centered design, what you just last mentioned. You're focusing on the learnings and on the early adopters to build your not only product but also business model and strategy. And the second term would be exit strategy. You mentioned sustainability, working on for the long term, thinking not only on the adoption but also beyond that. You know how this business model is going to scale and will be sustainable. That's in parallel a strategy that should be designed from the beginning, including the key actors. In this case, we are talking about a UN agency, a private sector company, and in many cases also governments. Governments play an important role and could play an important role in the sustainability, especially in Latin America, for example, where we work for governments. Often the exit strategy is with them after WFP has helped set the business model for growth. So the strategy and human-centered design are my main takeaways. Thanks, Ragnhild. I'll ask Charity the next question. Charity, SheCan, WFP project, and Tobacco Free Farm, a WHO initiative, are two innovative initiatives that originally developed separately for addressing different challenges. Can you tell us more about this approach of converging the two initiatives in the field and in your process of designing this scaling strategy to reach its potential?
Thank you very much, Alex, and greetings once more, everyone. So just to basically respond to your question, SheCan is a WFP innovation that uses blended financing to enhance access to finance for smallholder farmers, as well as entrepreneurs operating in the areas WFP supports. So it basically works on addressing some of the systematic challenges that are found in these areas that hinder the smallholder farmers, especially the women and the youth, from accessing the resources they need to basically invest in better inputs, diversify their livelihoods, as well as cope with climate change. So using donor resources as well as the private sector capital, this initiative ensures that these smallholder farmers, especially the women in the rural areas, are reached and are able to be saved with financial products. The initiative in Zambia started as a pilot in 2022, basically saving 8 districts, and it was able to facilitate access to finance from formal financing for over 6,000 beneficiaries. With this success, we scaled up this initiative from 8 to 26 districts, basically targeting 17,000 individuals. This was basically for us to have a deeper impact of the initiative, as well as to reach a diversified smallholder beneficiaries in these areas. When you look at the alternative livelihood projects, which is basically the tobacco-free farm initiative, this is an initiative or a joint collaboration between World Food Programme and the World Health Organization, aimed at supporting the former tobacco farmers to transition from tobacco growing to alternative, sustainable, and healthier livelihoods. So basically, this initiative supports these smallholder farmers so that they're able to basically look at these alternatives, noting the different challenges that tobacco farming has. Some of these challenges include the challenges with health. We know some of the health aspects that tobacco growing imposes on the farmers. We look at also the effect on the environment. We look at also the effect on national food security, noting that tobacco farming is labor intensive, and these smallholder farmers are not basically investing much time to grow food for themselves. So this initiative basically looks at how these can be supported. So when you look at Chicken as well as free farms, tobacco-free farms initiative, you find that there's a convergence. For us to support these tobacco farmers to basically transition to alternative livelihoods, there is need for them to basically have resources. And when you look at Chicken, which is enhancing the access to finance for smallholder farmers, this was something that was able to basically be integrated in this initiative to ensure that there is impact, as well as basically saving these tobacco farmers. What we notice basically the tobacco industry is something that is more like a really supported value chain with inputs and others across the entire value chain all the way up to the market. So we needed to basically support these smallholder farmers with an end-to-end market system that ensures that they have access to the resources they need to plant, as well as the technical knowledge for the production, the market aspect, as well as the access to finance needed for them to basically grow this initiative and also diversify their livelihood so that they're able to basically transition completely from tobacco growing. So these initiatives basically, Alex, have a shared focus. You find that in Chicken, we target mostly women, 60 to 70% women, as well as the youth. Also in the alternative livelihoods to tobacco, which is the tobacco-free farms, we target mostly women because we know that these are disproportionately affected. We also look at basically strengthening private sector engagement because we know that we cannot do it alone as WFP, as WHO, but we need the private sector for supporting some of the services for sustainability. We also basically look at looking at delivering some of the initiatives through the government structures to ensure that there is long-term effect as well as sustainability. Over time, really, what we've learned here is that it's important to provide an integrated support to these initiatives to ensure that we have all the support required for this production end to end, and also basically converge all these with the private sector for sustainability, as well as collaborating with different service providers to ensure that everyone is met. This is basically what I would say for the two initiatives, two innovations that WFP has been working on, also in conjunction with WHO. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Charity. Very interesting. There is something that Raquel also mentioned before about letting go. In this case, WFP and WHO saw that the potential and the advantage of working with the private sector. So each one can do what they do best and jointly work towards the main goal and towards that exit strategy. And it's great to see that it can happen not only in one agency, but also with multiple agencies. And thank you, Charity. These two projects were supported by, or are being supported by the UN Global Pulse, who identified the two initiatives separately, and now they are working together. And I wanted to ask Patricia, what did you learn about supporting scaling innovations across mandates and across agencies?
Thanks for the question, Alex. Let me first, I guess, acknowledge that what we have seen and already know is that there is already a large amount of innovation and innovating happening across the UN. We're definitely not short on creativity on how we can deliver on our promise more effectively. But the challenge that we face now, especially with the shifting geopolitical and ODA funding priorities, is how we scale what works in a way that delivers systemic impact with the limited resources that we have. But I'll start with how we came to work with SheCan and tobacco-free farms. So the UN Global Pulse Accelerator Program is a UN system-wide program that offers technical assistance to selected piloted innovations from across the UN to develop their strategies to bridge the gap between pilot and scale. Following this, we then provide grants and additional mentoring to the innovation teams with the most promising strategies to help them implement the strategies and begin their journey towards scale. And since 2023, we have run 2 cohorts, and we've just actually closed our call for applications to the 3rd cohort last night, midnight. And it is through the accelerator that we had the honor of supporting first tobacco-free farms initiatives in cohort 1 and SheCan. They are both grant recipients, so tobacco-free farms led by WHO from cohort 1, working specifically in the Kenya context, and then SheCan led by WFP from cohort 2. So I guess the first key lesson from having worked with them and observing the work across the UN is that I think Charity mentioned already is that we have shared focus. And with shared problems, it demands shared solutions. And despite mandate differences, the SDGs in which we collectively want to achieve for people and planet are fundamentally interconnected. A breakthrough in what might have first been from a strong public health angle, like with tobacco-free farms, we can see now it directly influences food security, climate resilience, gender equity, and economic inclusion, of which the last 2, for example, gender equity and economic inclusion, are also the primary focus of SheCan. And now, as we see, these 2 innovative approaches have found each other in Zambia and complemented each other to amplify their impact significantly together. If we approach innovation scaling in silos, we miss opportunities for ripple effects like this to take hold. And then I guess secondly, for UN Global Pulse, scaling is about amplifying the added value of an innovation and making its impact sustainable. It can be about size or direction, but we're not bound by that as long as it's about reaching that impact. And how SheCan and tobacco-free farms work in Zambia is also a lesson on what scaling across the UN could look like. And as Charity had described earlier, both initiatives have shown us that integration, so layering complementary efforts, is where we can see real traction for impact. So I think it's clear that scaling across mandates and agencies is possible, it's necessary, and that scaling is not a solo act. We certainly shouldn't treat it like one. Ranghild had also pointed out earlier the significance of partnerships for a sustainable model. So I think if there's one key lesson to take away that I'd like to really highlight is that through the example of SheCan and tobacco-free farms, it's showing that the whole really can be greater than the sum of its parts.
Thanks, Patricia. Great words. I would like to go back to the audience and see if there is any question. And in the meantime, yeah, I wanted to highlight that the support and the belief of innovation programs like the Humanitarian Innovation Program or UN Global Pulse lies on that, the collaboration between private sector and UN agency and other actors in the ecosystem. That is what is going to bring innovation to impact. Without that, it's possible that innovation just stays as an initiative, as an idea. To achieve scale, to achieve impact at scale overall, we need that collaboration in the long term. Okay, we have a question to Nilus, to Adi. I'm talking about this actually. Adi and Nilus being the speedboats trying to work with tankers. And what were for you and your team the biggest operational and cultural challenges that you faced when adapting Nilus to this different country context? You mentioned already 5 countries in the region. I know that there are others in the pipeline. And what have you learned to overcome them, these challenges?
Well, so Nidus does 2 things. One is manage a logistics operation in Mexico and Argentina, where we acquire customers and we deliver the food to them. They order online through our application. And then there is another line of work with the UN World Food Program, whereby we empower technologically the operations of the organization so that their food distribution tasks are carried out more effectively or even efficiently. So when we scaled our operation, we had to adapt mostly our marketing. The value proposition stays the same all across the region. There are low-income people that live in places where traditional retail doesn't get there. Alex, are you speaking? Okay, okay. Sorry about that. So there are places where supermarkets and big retailers don't set up shop, which means that people end up paying higher prices for the groceries that they buy, even though they are markedly poorer than other members of society. So the main goal stays the same, but how we operate in each case is different. And in the case of the scaling with the UN World Food Program, we have 3 distinct stakeholders to get to know. The local UN World Food Program officers. 2, the people who manage the products that are delivered, being retailers, school parents, associations, people who carry out part of the distribution work, and then the beneficiaries, in most cases, kids in school who receive them. And as we were saying in the last question, getting to know all of them is what determines whether or not you have something in your hands that people want. That's all you need to think about. Do I have something that people want? And in order to know what people want, you need to get to know them. So the main challenge when you are, or at least when we did embark on a new line of business, such as empowering the UN World Food Program digitally as opposed to deliver the food ourselves, or when you expand to a new market, the challenge is the same. How to get to know the people we're serving so well that what we come up with is actually useful to them to the point that they want it. For a small startup like ours, getting to know retailers, parents associations, and beneficiaries in 5 countries in a matter of 12 weeks is impossible. So that's why, that's another reason why collaborating with an organization that has footprint in all of these countries is essential. I'm not going to say it's all perfect and rosy, because it's not, in the same way that customers and retailers, they are all made of people, and you need to get to know people, and you need to learn to understand what motivates them. The same happens when we're trying to work with the UN. You need to get to know the officers, you need to get to know what motivates them. But having said that, in the majority of cases, you don't know whether people share an overarching principle or goal. But we do know that the World Food Program shares an overarching objective of fighting hunger, and that people there are there because they care about it. So it makes it a whole lot easier.
Thanks, Adi. Yeah, knowing your customers, no, in this case, the three of them, and they could be different. It's not only the ultimate beneficiary we are creating impact for. It's also the program and policy officer of a UN agency. It's also all the actors in the government, in the ecosystem. So each of them have different interests and is expecting a different value and benefits. And knowing the incentives is what helps building that scaling strategy and the exit strategy. It's of course not easy. It's hard to understand difficult mandates, different diverse people. So I wanted to ask Ragnhild again, from HIP Norway's role, what do you see, or what do you do to connect these dots, to foster this cross-agency collaboration, to incentivize and to promote its long-term sustainability for scaling innovations?
Thank you. So one concrete thing that we've done is financial. So if we have consortia of 3 or more agencies, humanitarian organizations, collaborating on a proposal for a pilot with us, then they are eligible to apply for a higher sum of grant funding. And then we also play a role, of course, in connecting our innovation projects and trying to foster a community of practice, and also working with the organizations on more structural barriers to innovation and collaboration. We work on innovation-friendly procurement. We have support around intellectual property rights, all these sort of more bureaucratic aspects that can be that can hinder innovation and collaboration. And then we also hear from a lot of innovators and agencies that they want more information, they want more shared platforms, they want easier ways to access information about other innovations that other agencies have done. But I believe that more important is the incentive structures being in place, because I think if you just put a lot of information out there, but people don't really have the resources or incentives to spend time on utilizing and finding that information, then these exchanges can become a little bit stale, and we end up receiving and giving information and we don't really do anything about it. The difficulty, I think, for donors is trying to incentivize adoption across agencies and scaling without sort of creating artificial markets. So my question, and I would love to hear if anyone has anything smart to suggest around this, because let's say we were to further financially incentivize agencies to adopt the solutions of other agencies. How do we make sure that we are not kind of rewarding the adoption of a solution that there isn't sufficient demand for? So I think that's the tricky balance for donors. But I do believe that we should all be looking toward how can we make sure that the adoption and the collaboration around innovation is as celebrated as piloting a new solution on your own. Because I think for a lot of agencies, piloting is easier. An example is that through our program, we get a much higher share of pilot applications than scaling applications. And so I think I think we need a system where it's also rewarded in terms of donor funding to suggest scaling and adoption, innovation projects that are cross-agency and that focus on wide-scale adoption, but in a way that doesn't sort of create these artificial structures for the wrong solutions, let's say. So any suggestions welcome for us and how we can contribute to doing that.
Thanks, Raquel. I would also love to hear ideas and recommendations about that. That's what we challenge, what we try to address and every day in our work on supporting and scaling innovations. There is no structure and single solution for all of them. Each journey is very different to each other, to another. And I've faced many times this temptation of trying to push a solution or a technology or not technology project because it could make sense, and maybe it does. It's just that it could not be the right timing or not the right actors or not the right location. Pivoting is and letting go also an important skill and value to have, to be able to find that journey that will help achieve an impact at scale. Like in the private sector, this is very similar to the private sector. We have seen many cases where venture capitalists or investors just try to push a solution, and many times it doesn't work, and sometimes it works. And there are many factors and variables in the equation. And maybe we can hear from Charity in Zambia. What incentives and criteria in Zambia they see for building up this strategy for scaling both chicken and tobacco-free farms? What have you learned so far? What key success criteria you have in place at the moment for this exit strategy and sustainability?
Thank you very much, Alex, really for that. So basically, when we look at the tobacco-free farms, this is an initiative that started with 500 smallholder households and has now scaled up to 1,500 beneficiaries. We are hoping to reach 12,000 beneficiaries by next year with additional resources. However, what we've noted really for the scale up of these initiatives, what is important is basically comprehensive reviews of the pilots. We really need to be flexible in reviewing the pilots if we want to scale up, so that we are able to basically look at what worked, what didn't work, so that informs the design of the scale up. As you mentioned, it's not just about scaling up what we're already doing, but basically scaling up with solutions that are able to basically respond to the needs on the ground. So comprehensive review is something that is really big for us in the initiative of basically scaling up. The other aspect is basically beneficiary engagement. This is something that is also very good when you're basically piloting, engaging the beneficiaries so that you're able to basically have that feedback that's able to inform the scaling up options. For the chicken, really, and also for the tobacco-free farms, what we've noted in the scale up is basically partnering with the private sector. We know that it's not every time that you have basically donor resources and others, so basically pilot these and basically scaling up. But building that partnership with the private sector, which is able to go beyond the project, is something that is very important. For example, what we do under the chicken as well as tobacco-free farms, building the capacity of these smallholder farmers as well as the government structures on the ground. So what we do is basically, it's not just linking these smallholder farmers to access to finance, but basically also training them on the prudent use of these resources. With the enhanced capacity building, we're able to basically see that even as they're getting these resources, they're able to basically invest them wisely. We also look at basically the provision of finance, as well as input service providers, as well as even the market that comes from the private sector. What we've noted also is basically building this capacity both in the districts and in the areas, as well as outside the districts, to ensure that there's sustainability. These are some of the key aspects I can talk about. But then just to mention, Alex, also another aspect for Shiken on the enhancing of the access to finance. As I mentioned, the Shiken is basically innovating to resolve some of the systemic challenges that hinder smallholder farmers from accessing finance. And one of the hindrances that I wanted to talk about is basically the transaction costs that are involved in saving the smallholder farmers who are in remote areas. What we've done basically is also coming up or basically supporting the private sector to develop a digital platform that is able to basically digitize these smallholder farmers who we work through savings groups. As you may know, we implement the savings for change model, where we basically encourage these smallholder farmers to save and also borrow from the groups. And then this is one unit that we use once they mature to link to external financing. We've noted that through digitization, even the smallholder farmers are able to basically access financing from the platform. Even the financial service providers that have challenges with reaching these smallholder farmers in remote areas are able to provide these services using the platform. And the platform also ensures that even the market aspect, the input provision are all in on one platform to ensure end-to-end from production as well as consumption, to ensure that all these are in one platform that is digital, to reduce some of the transaction costs that would normally really be passed on to smallholder farmers if they were to be led just like that. So really important for scaling up to review, as well as basically hear from the smallholder farmers, as well as look at sustainable partnerships, which in this case are the private sector, who will be there even after WFP, as well as the government structures that are there with the smallholder farmers, even after the project. Thank you, and over.
Thanks, Charity. So as long as it adds value to the different customers and stakeholders, I mean, the incentives would come from that value that it's created to the different stakeholders. For a farmer, it could be the credit for working capital, or the private sector financial service provider that is offering that loan to the farmer. They also need to earn an interest, so they have a financial sustainability and economic sustainability. Then for the government, and same, there is value that they expect to be created, and if that source of value is identified for each of the actors in the business model, then comprehensive strategy should have more potential and more chances to work and to scale. That's what I hear from Charity. I wanted to ask Patricia as well. I know that you and Global Pulse conducted for a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, surveys and interviews and studies and programs that were supporting scaling innovations, to learn from them, and to identify challenges and build up a program that exists now based on those learnings. So I wanted to ask, what's does the UN Global Pulse think and believe on that should be in place? So scaling is the norm rather than just the exception.
Thanks, Alex. And yes, that's from our Scaling the Summit report, which we conducted, we finished conducting our scoping exercise across the UN system probably about 2 years ago now. And what we learned from that is that scaling innovations is complex, both in supporting it and especially in doing it, but also it's not revolutionary entirely. We also know that we talk about what's needed for them, and we talk about them often, such as breaking silos and collaborating, having the support of a strong ecosystem and enabling environment. We need access to flexible funding, all of which are really important. But just going back to an earlier point that I've made, that there's a lot of innovations and innovating going on, either consciously or intentionally, or they can also happen without us deliberately doing it, out of the simple need to deliver better. And I had a conversation recently with a colleague from another agency who said, we didn't mean for our approach to be an innovation, we just wanted to see how it could do better, but it happened gradually and with a lot of challenges and convincing, but the innovation happened. I guess what I'm trying to say is that innovation is already becoming the norm, whether we realize it or not, but the scaling part, so scaling them needs to be the norm too. And it shouldn't be treated as something that sits on the side, that's shrouded with mystery, because there are many good pilots, but many of them also stall, or worse, they're unknowingly duplicated elsewhere. Like I said before, we have shared problems, and the well-being of people and the planet is a shared problem. So I think we need to start acknowledging shared ownership to address that together as well, and pursue active collaboration across the UN, like how we have seen with SheCan and the Tobacco Free Farms Initiative. But also we need to look outside the UN at traditional and non-traditional partners. So something another colleague once said that now sticks with me is that he said, sometimes the very expertise that the UN needs is actually found outside the UN. And certainly at UN Global Pulse, one way of us trying to bring together voices on innovation scaling to ease information sharing about what others are doing is through the innovation scaling group that is co-managed with us under the UN Innovation Network. My second point also is that is something that Ranjit had also touched upon about incentive structures. We must also normalize and broaden support for innovations looking for help to scale. Scaling is complex. It's a long, multi-element, multi-player journey. And for it to be the norm, structured help for those who embark on that journey must be easily accessible. There are already existing initiatives that we found out through our scoping exercise for the Scaling the Summit report. So WFP Innovation Accelerator is one example, and then there's UNICEF Spark, which support agency-specific scaling, and then there's us with the UN Global Pulse Accelerator program, which is open to any and all UN entities. So these support structures provide funding, dedicated resources, space, both literally and metaphorically as well, to reflect, and also technical guidance to strengthen the elements needed for scaling. These support structures can give innovation and scaling, both often usually seen as risky business, the assurance that they need, especially in the UN context where safe, reliable delivery is needed. But to summarize, there's always a long list of what we need, Alex, but I guess first, and I can't emphasize this enough, we need to open the doors, partner, collaborate. We need to share. We need to tap into each other's strengths to help us all go further. And secondly, to make innovation scaling the norm, making support and incentives, make support and incentives for scaling the norm too. Colleagues on the ground are often already stretched thin by the day-to-day, focused on program delivery, often under pressure in complex settings. So asking them to scale without giving them the right support is unrealistic. We need to build support structures for scaling into our business as usual, not an add-on, so that we can give innovations and a chance and set them up for success and to achieve what they have set up to achieve.
Great words. Couldn't agree more, Patricia. It should be part of our day-to-day business and not extra work. And yeah, here in the region, we are working on strengthening the culture of innovation and the mindset of innovation to try to bring that into the day-to-day business and the day-to-day thinking of our colleagues. Because that we believe that it's key. And before talking about strategy and technology, to have that embedded in our culture and in our mindsets. And I see a question in the chat about the two innovation programs in Norway and UN Global Pulse, if they are open for East Africa. Raquel and Patricia, if you can quickly address that, please?
Sure. It's open to all UN entities and also to any innovation project that's active in globally. It can be one country, one region, multiple. It's open to all.
Thanks.
Just a note though that cohort 3 closed last night, unfortunately. So
okay.
Thank you.
Our program is open to any location where there is humanitarian response, so there's no geographical focus. And I also see a question from Lina in the Q&A, but I don't know if we have time.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So very quickly, how can you engage with end users in practice? For us, this is something that you have to answer what your plan is already in the application to us. So we expect projects to engage with end users from the beginning. There are sort of more traditional and more creative ways of doing this. Some people have co-creation workshops with the private sector, with people affected by crisis and the organizations in the same room, for example, working on challenge statements and solutions, working creatively together. But then there's also strength in, for example, we've had projects in communities where local private sector partners have had support staff available regularly. We had a project with energy ambassadors, for example, that were present in this village in Mozambique as new solutions were being rolled out. And they actually get a lot of information through the maintenance requests, through the customer feedback, through training people in using new solutions. And that is also adopted into the pilot so that we know what the challenges and opportunities are. And we've also had a project in Kenya, for example, using something they call the Live Lab. And they have a project that's very sort of data-driven. It's about registering children with disabilities so that they can be better helped in humanitarian crises. And it's important not to just then sit yourself down at a desk and design a digital solution for that without engaging with users. So what they did was they created a one-day event where everyone who had children with disabilities could come and could get registered and assessed in one day. So that way you're immediately delivering impact through your pilot project, which is very good. But you're also engaging with users in the project design from the beginning. And any lessons where there had to be rethinking is we were just in the Philippines visiting early adopters of this solution, where part of the innovation project is based on the users retrofitting. Originally, it was retrofitting their homes to be more resistant in typhoons. And then it turned out nobody wanted to retrofit their houses. They wanted to build new structures. And if the project hadn't gone out there and actually worked with people, they wouldn't have known this. And typically all of our projects is set up with, implementing partners working directly with populations already, and then introducing an innovation with people that they already know, and then seeing what they're actually interested in and what their behavior is like. So trying to answer that very quickly. Yes.
Thanks, Raquel. Yeah, that's great advice, and it applies for this project, and I'm sure that for it's a concept for different contexts and different solutions. Just listening to your customers and to the people we serve first, there is where the answers are to our strategies. We are on time, so to wrap up this nice conversation, just wanted to ask Ari and Charity for one key words as advice that you would give to the audience here. People like you that would like to work on scaling innovation or are working on scaling innovations. What's your highlights for them? Oh, Ari cannot hear us. Let me just the mic is not working. Let me ask Charity first while we solve this mic.
Thank you, Alex, for that. One aspect I'd like to highlight here with regards to basically scaling up is beneficiary feedback, because ultimately whatever we're scaling up is for the beneficiary. So basically getting that feedback from the beneficiaries even as we're scaling up, so that we're able to basically learn from the lessons of the pilot and integrate some aspects that they feel would work better for them. The other aspects, really, I know you said one, but I think I want to mention that digitization of operations is something that will basically enhance scale, looking at the beneficiaries that we save and the locations. Digitization is something that is basically going to ensure that even as we scale, we're able to scale really to levels that cannot defy physical presence. Thank you, and over.
Thanks, Charity. We couldn't unmute Adi for some reason, a technical reason here, but I'll ask him to write in the chat just the keywords, and please, also if you feel like contact details in case audience wants to reach out and get advice from you. With this, I would like to thank you, Ragnhild, Patricia, Adi, and Charity for this lovely conversation. We could continue for hours, I'm sure, and that it's just a continuation. And thank everyone for joining today, and those who will look at the recording later. Greetings to you. And feel free to reach out. We are always available to continue the chat bilaterally as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day, evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.